The morning of May 14th, 1607, begins with uncertainty. 3 English ships, the Susan Constant, Godspeed, and Discovery, drop anchor along a marshy peninsula on the James River in Virginia. 104 men and boys step onto unfamiliar soil. They're exhausted from a 4-month Atlantic crossing that tested every limit of human endurance. But they're hopeful, desperately hopeful. They've come to find gold, to claim land for England, to build a new world far from the poverty and rigid social hierarchy of London. They named their settlement Jamestown, after King James I, their sovereign. This moment will be remembered as the birth of English America, the beginning of a nation. But the reality they're about to face is nothing like the paradise promised in the Virginia Company's propaganda. These aren't seasoned pioneers or experienced farmers who know how to work the land. They're gentlemen adventurers, wealthy men who've never worked with their hands and refuse to start now. Indentured servants, poor Englishmen escaping crushing poverty, bound to 7 years of unpaid labor in exchange for passage. A handful of soldiers, blacksmiths, carpenters, and boys as young as 12 sent as cheap labor. They came for riches and glory. Instead, they'll find swarms of mosquitoes, devastating disease, slow starvation, and violent conflict. Of the 104 who arrived in May, only 38 will live to see 1608. 70% dead within 8 months. Welcome to Forgotten Days. Today, we're spending 24 hours in Jamestown during the brutal summer of 1607. This is the real story of America's first permanent English colony, not the sanitized version taught in schools. The story of survival against impossible odds. The story of human desperation, failure, and somehow, against all logic, eventual perseverance. It's 5:30 a.m., July 20th, 1607. The Virginia summer is absolutely brutal. The air is thick with humidity you can almost drink. Mosquitoes swarm in massive, tormenting clouds. The heat is suffocating even before sunrise. Our story today follows 2 men whose experiences in Jamestown couldn't be more different. John Leyden, a 22-year-old laborer from the slums of East London, an indentured servant bound to 7 years of unpaid work in exchange for his passage to Virginia. He owns nothing but the rotting clothes on his back. And Captain John Martin, a gentleman, the son of Sir Richard Martin, a wealthy London goldsmith and former Lord Mayor. Martin invested a fortune in this Virginia venture, expecting quick returns and profit. John Leyden wakes on a dirt floor covered with vermin. His shelter is barely more than branches leaned against a rough frame, covered with mud and strips of bark. The colonists optimistically call them English wigwams. There are no beds, no blankets, no furniture of any kind, just damp earth and the filthy, lice-infested clothes he's worn for months. His stomach cramps violently. Rations were cut again yesterday. The supplies they brought are running dangerously low. Breakfast is a cup of watery barley gruel, more water than grain. Maybe a piece of wormy ship's biscuit if he's lucky enough to get one. That's it. That's all there is. Outside his pitiful shelter, the James fort is slowly, painfully taking shape. A triangular wooden palisade, 15 feet high, 100 yards on each side, forming a triangle that encloses about an acre of land. 3 diamond-shaped bulwarks at the corners, each mounted with small cannon. It's not primarily protection from Spanish ships, though that's a real fear. It's protection from the Powhatan, people whose land they've occupied without permission. The relationship with the natives started peacefully enough. Chief Powhatan even traded corn to keep them alive. But tensions are rising fast. The English keep demanding more corn, more food, more everything. The Powhatan are growing hostile. And the colonists? They're too weak, too sick, and too inexperienced to defend themselves properly if war comes. John Leyden grabs a wooden shovel. He's been assigned to dig a well inside the fort. The brackish river water is making everyone violently sick with dysentery and typhoid. But digging in this heat, with no food, is pure torture. He looks at the rising sun and knows today will be hell. Another day of survival, nothing more. By 7 a.m., the fort is buzzing with activity, or what passes for activity among starving, diseased, exhausted men. John Leyden swings his shovel into the hard clay soil of Virginia. Every movement is pure agony. His hands are covered in oozing blisters. His back screams in pain. His muscles, starved of nutrition, feel like they're tearing apart. Around him, other laborers fell trees with dull axes, saw planks with worn blades, and haul massive logs for the palisade walls. The work is backbreaking. It's also essential. Without these walls, they're defenseless. But here's the problem. The gentlemen, about half the colonists, refuse to work. Captain John Martin sits comfortably in the shade of a half-built storehouse, writing in his leather-bound journal. He and the other gentlemen investors firmly believe physical labor is beneath their social status. In England, this is simply how society functions. Gentlemen supervise. Laborers work. They came to direct operations, not to sweat like common peasants. This creates immediate, explosive conflict. Captain John Smith, the colony's most experienced soldier and explorer, is absolutely furious. He's the one who risked his life negotiating with Chief Powhatan for corn. He's the one who explored the dangerous surrounding territory. He's the one actively keeping them alive through his efforts. And he's disgusted by the gentleman's arrogant refusal to help when survival is at stake. "He that will not work shall not eat," Smith declares boldly. It's a revolutionary statement. In rigid English society, social hierarchy is sacred and unchangeable. But here, in this desperate place on the edge of survival, Smith argues that staying alive matters more than maintaining status. The gentlemen are outraged at this insolence. How dare a mere soldier challenge their authority? But they're also starving. Their ribs are showing. Their strength is fading. Slowly, reluctantly, a few pick up tools for the first time in their privileged lives. Meanwhile, the biggest threat to Jamestown isn't internal class conflict. It's disease. The marshy, swampy location they chose is a perfect breeding ground for disease-carrying mosquitoes. Malaria, typhoid, dysentery, all spreading rapidly through the weakened population. Men are dying daily now, sometimes multiple men in a single day. They're buried hastily outside the fort walls in unmarked graves. The colonists don't want the Powhatan to know how weak and vulnerable they've become. By mid-morning, 3 more men are too sick to stand. They lie in their shelters, shaking with fever. One won't survive the week. He'll be dead and buried before anyone even learns his name. John Layden keeps digging his well, one painful shovelful at a time. He has absolutely no choice. Die working or die starving. Those are his only 2 options in Jamestown.
Noon. The sun is directly overhead, beating down mercilessly. The temperature inside the cramped, airless fort reaches 95 degrees. There's no escape from the heat, no shade deep enough, no breeze strong enough to provide relief. John Layden collapses in the shade of the palisade wall, gasping for air like a dying fish. His ration for the entire day, half a cup of barley and a piece of dried fish the size of his thumb, is already gone, consumed hours ago. His body is literally eating itself, muscle turning to energy, fat reserves long since exhausted. A few desperate men attempt to fish in the James River using crude nets and hooks. They catch almost nothing. The river is brackish here, half salt water, half fresh. Fish are surprisingly scarce in these murky waters. Others try to hunt in the dense surrounding forest for deer, rabbits, anything edible. But the Powhatan people control these lands absolutely. They know every trail, every hiding spot. Venturing too far from the fort alone is suicide. 2 weeks ago, a group of 4 men went hunting without permission. Only one returned, badly wounded. The others were killed by Powhatan warriors defending their territory. So the colonists stay trapped inside the fort, slowly starving while surrounded by abundant forests. Captain Martin, meanwhile, is writing urgent, desperate letters to the Virginia Company back in London. "Send supplies immediately," he writes with increasing panic. "Send more men. Send food. Send anything." But he knows perfectly well those letters won't reach England for months. They'll travel by ship across a dangerous ocean. And even if they do arrive safely, help won't come until next spring at the earliest. They're completely on their own, abandoned in the wilderness. The gentlemen hold a tense meeting in the afternoon heat. Some want to abandon Jamestown entirely, return to the ships, and sail home to England. Others argue they've invested too much to quit now. Their fortunes are tied to this venture's success. But success seems impossible. They're dying faster than they can bury the dead. John Smith stands up and makes a brutal assessment. "Gentlemen," he says coldly, "we have two choices. Work together and possibly survive, or maintain your pride and definitely die. The decision," he adds, "is yours to make." The room falls silent. Outside, another man dies of fever, bringing the death toll to 66. Only 38 colonists remain alive, and summer isn't even over yet. At 3 p.m., shouts ring out from the fort walls. Indians approaching. To arms. John Layden and the other laborers drop their tools and scramble for weapons. Rusty swords, old muskets, anything that might serve as defense. But this isn't an attack. A group of Powhatan warriors approaches under a peace flag, a branch of green leaves held high. They've brought food, baskets of corn, dried fish, and fresh venison. Chief Powhatan, the powerful ruler of dozens of tribes in the region, is trying to maintain peaceful relations. For now, Captain Christopher Newport, the expedition leader, meets them at the gate. Through halting sign language and a few English words the Powhatan have learned, negotiations begin. The natives want copper. Specifically, they want copper cooking pots, which they consider extremely valuable. In exchange, they're offering food that could keep the colonists alive another few weeks. It's an unequal trade. The English are desperate. The Powhatan know it. But Newport has no choice. He agrees to the terms. John Layden watches this exchange with mixed feelings. The Powhatan saved their lives. Without the corn they've provided, every single colonist would already be dead. But he also knows the English are occupying Powhatan land without permission. They're guests who've overstayed their welcome. Demanding guests at that. How long before Powhatan patience runs out? How long before peace turns to war? After the trade is complete, the Powhatan warriors leave quickly. They don't linger. They don't socialize. The message is clear. This is business, not friendship. The colonists distribute the corn immediately. Each man receives a small portion. It's not enough to satisfy hunger, but it's enough to survive another day. John Layden eats his share slowly, savoring every kernel. He knows this corn represents the difference between life and death. The Powhatan literally hold the colony's survival in their hands, and everyone in Jamestown knows it. For now, there's an uneasy peace, but underneath, tensions simmer. The English want land, resources, and eventually dominance. The Powhatan want these strange, demanding foreigners gone. Something will eventually break. It's not a question of if, only when. As evening falls, the temperature finally drops slightly. It's still oppressively hot, but at least the sun has stopped beating down directly. John Layden sits outside his shelter, too exhausted to move. Around him, the surviving colonists gather in small groups. Some pray, others stare into space, too defeated to speak. A few write letters they know might never be sent, final words to families they may never see again. Captain Martin looks around at what remains of their grand expedition. When they left England in December 1606, they were full of excitement and ambition. The Virginia Company's promotional materials promised fertile land, friendly natives, and easy wealth. They were told gold could be picked up from riverbeds, that the natives would eagerly trade, that within months, they'd all be rich beyond imagination. Every single promise was a lie. There is no gold. They've searched desperately and found nothing. The land is fertile, yes, but they don't know how to farm it properly. The natives are sophisticated and powerful, not the simple people they expected to easily dominate. And wealth? The only wealth here is survival, making it through one more day. Martin realizes with crushing certainty that he's lost everything. His investment is gone, his dreams destroyed. If he makes it back to England alive, he'll return in disgrace and poverty. But right now, making it back alive seems highly unlikely. John Smith gathers the survivors for a brutal announcement. "Gentlemen and laborers," he begins, "let me be absolutely clear about our situation. We have food for perhaps 2 more weeks, maybe 3 if we ration severely. The ships that brought us here have already sailed back to England. No help is coming anytime soon. Our only chance of survival is to work together, every man, regardless of status. Those who refuse to work will receive no food. I will enforce this rule personally." He pauses, letting his words sink in. "We either cooperate and live, or we maintain our English prejudices and die. The choice truly is that simple." For once, no one argues. They're too tired, too hungry, too close to death to protest. The age of gentleman's privilege in Jamestown is officially over. From now on, survival is the only status that matters.
Night falls over Jamestown. The fort is dark except for a few carefully rationed fires. They can't afford to waste firewood. Every resource must be preserved. John Leyden lies on his dirt floor, staring up through gaps in his shelter's roof at the stars above. Back in London, he was nobody, a faceless laborer in overcrowded slums. Here, he's still nobody, but at least he's nobody with a chance, however slim, at a different future. If he survives his 7 years of servitude, he'll be granted land. His own land. Something impossible in England's rigid class system. That hope, distant and unlikely as it is, keeps him going. Across the fort, Captain Martin also can't sleep. He thinks about his father back in London. A successful, respected man who believed in his son's venture. Martin wonders if he'll ever see his father again. If he does, what will he say? How will he explain this disaster? He invested family wealth in a dream that's become a nightmare. But here's what neither John Leyden nor John Martin can possibly know on this July night in 1607. Jamestown will survive. Barely, by the thinnest possible margin. The winter of 1609 to 1610, known as the Starving Time, will be even worse than this summer. Of 500 colonists, only 60 will survive that winter. Some will resort to cannibalism. Yes, cannibalism. Archaeological evidence discovered centuries later will confirm this horrifying fact. But somehow, impossibly, the colony will endure. Supply ships will eventually arrive. New colonists will come. John Rolfe will introduce tobacco cultivation, creating the cash crop that makes Virginia economically viable. And from this desperate, failing settlement will eventually grow the most powerful nation on earth. The United States of America traces its English colonial roots directly to this place, to these suffering men in this miserable fort, to John Leyden, who will become one of Jamestown's few success stories, surviving his indenture, marrying, and establishing a family line, to Captain John Smith, whose leadership will prove essential to the colony's survival, even to the failures like John Martin, whose mistakes taught valuable lessons. Every person in Jamestown, survivor and victim alike, plays a role in this larger story. They don't know they're making history. They're just trying desperately not to die. 5:30 a.m., July 21st, 1607. The sun rises on another day in Jamestown. John Leyden wakes to the same hunger, the same heat, the same mosquitoes. Nothing has changed overnight. Nothing has improved. But he's still alive. And in Jamestown, that counts as success. Breakfast is even smaller today than yesterday. The corn from the Powhatan trade is being strictly rationed. A few spoonfuls of cornmeal porridge. Nothing more. But it's something. It's fuel. It's survival. John picks up his shovel and returns to digging the well. The same back-breaking work. The same pain. But also the same determination to see another sunset. This is the reality of early colonial life in America. Not the romantic myth taught in elementary schools. Not brave pilgrims building a shining city on a hill. It's brutal. It's desperate. It's often ugly. The colonists aren't heroes or villains. They're humans pushed to their absolute limits. They make terrible decisions. They mistreat each other. They occupy land that isn't theirs. They also show remarkable resilience. They adapt. They eventually learn. Captain Smith organizes the men into work details. Some continue building fortifications. Others attempt to plant English crops that will mostly fail in Virginia's different climate and soil. A few are assigned to maintain relations with the Powhatan, a delicate, dangerous diplomatic dance. Everyone works now, even the gentlemen. Pride is a luxury they can no longer afford. Survival requires every hand, every back, every ounce of strength. By mid-morning, the heat is already oppressive again. Another man collapses from fever. He's carried to a shelter where he'll likely die within days. The survivors barely react anymore. Death has become routine, expected. They've learned to keep working, keep moving, keep fighting, because stopping means dying. And despite everything, something in the human spirit refuses to quit. This is the real story of Jamestown, not a tale of easy triumph, but a testament to human endurance in the face of overwhelming odds. Some days, just surviving is the victory.
Let's talk about what happened next.
John Leyden survived. Against all odds, he lived. He completed his 7 years of indentured servitude. He married Anne Burris, one of the first women to arrive in Jamestown. They had 4 daughters, the first English children born in Virginia. His descendants spread across America. His legacy lives on. Captain John Martin also survived this first terrible summer, but he never found the wealth he sought. He returned to England somewhat disgraced. The Virginia Company eventually went bankrupt. Most investors lost everything, but the colony of Virginia survived and grew. Captain John Smith became a legendary figure, part hero, part self-promoter. His relationship with Pocahontas became American mythology, though the real story is far more complicated than Disney suggests. He left Virginia in 1609, but spent the rest of his life promoting American colonization. His writings helped attract new settlers despite Jamestown's horrible reputation. The Powhatan, people who showed mercy to these struggling colonists, would soon regret their kindness. As more English settlers arrived, they demanded more land, more resources, more control. By 1622, open warfare erupted. The Powhatan Confederacy fought desperately to drive the invaders out. They failed. Superior English weapons and endless waves of new colonists overwhelmed them. Within a generation, the Powhatan way of life was destroyed. This is the darker truth behind colonial America's founding. Today, Jamestown is a historical site, a museum, a tourist attraction. You can walk the grounds where these men suffered and died. You can see archaeological remains of the original fort. You can visit recreated buildings that show how the colonists lived. But standing there on that peaceful Virginia riverbank, it's hard to imagine the desperation of 1607. The hunger, the disease, the fear, the daily struggle just to survive one more day. This is why channels like Forgotten Days exist. To remember the real history, the complicated truth. American history didn't begin with heroic pilgrims and happy Thanksgiving dinners. It began with suffering, failure, and somehow, eventually, perseverance. It began with ordinary people pushed beyond their limits. People like John Leyden, who just wanted a better life. People like Captain Martin, who learned that ambition isn't enough. People like John Smith, who discovered that leadership means serving others, not just commanding them. Jamestown reminds us that founding a nation is messy, it's painful, it's morally complicated. There are no pure heroes, no simple narratives, just humans trying to survive, trying to build something, trying to create a future, sometimes failing, sometimes succeeding, always struggling. Thank you for spending a day in 1607 with us here on Forgotten Days. If this story challenged what you thought you knew about American history, please subscribe for more real stories from our past. Next episode, A Day in Plymouth Colony, 1621, the real story behind the first Thanksgiving. Until then, remember, history is never as simple as we're taught in school. The truth is always more complicated, and often, that makes it more meaningful. This has been Forgotten Days.